Happy Thursday, folks. Welcome to Throwback Thursday. Now, you may remember back in 2018, during our very first season, we focused in on no pass, no play. Basically, that means if you fail one or more classes, you're not eligible to play and or participate in any extracurricular activities, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, soccer, any athletic activities, or extracurriculars like band, choir, ROTC, any extracurricular activities. So far, only one state has had that law, and only one state. But one school is having that new policy. Let's take a look.
The DeLand Weldon School District will have to work a little harder to stay in sports or any club. The district has adopted a new policy. Students participating in any extracurricular activity must now pass all of their classes. Until now, they only needed to pass 5 courses.
We feel that students need to prioritize their education before looking at their extracurriculars. So if a student is failing a class, they probably need to take a step back from the extracurriculars and get their academics up before returning to the season.
The principal feels there should be little pushback on the new policy. Classes begin August 17th.
And there probably needs to be pushback. Here's something from Stacey Gonzalez.
Hey guys, it's Coach Gonzalez here. I'm going to talk to you about eligibility. So for the middle school, we go by UIL rules, and you have to be able to pass your classes in order to play because you're a student athlete first. So your grades are very important. So you have to be able to make a 70 or higher on your report card in order for you to be able to participate for sports, fine arts, so that's choir, band, orchestra, or even the academic decathlon stuff that we have that go on as well. And that has to be in every single one of your classes, that you have to make a 70 or higher. But you should be striving to make A's and B's, but you need at least a 70 or higher in order to be able to participate. So what that means is, if you fail for the 6 weeks, so if whenever your report card comes out and it is in your hands and it says that you look at all your classes, and if you are failing a class or more with a 70 or the 69 or below, then you cannot play for 3 weeks. So that means that you can't ride the bus or anything. You can still go to games, but you can't sit on the bench or anything. You have to just sit in the bleachers and watch. But you are still expected to go to practice and be able to still participate that way, because when the report cards come out in 3 weeks later, and if you are passing all your classes, not just the class that you failed, but you have to be passing every single one of your classes with a 70 or higher, then you're able to be able to participate again. So that's why we ask that you still come to practice, because if you are passing on your report or your progress report, then you're able to start playing again. But not that day. You have to wait until Friday. So eligibility goes from Friday to Friday of those 3 weeks. But if you fail again, so let's say your progress report comes out and then you didn't pass one of your classes, I'll go over that here in a second, but this only pertains to the ones who have failed for the 6 weeks prior to that progress report coming out. If you failed on your progress report but you didn't fail on your report card, then you're okay. And remember, progress reports only help you, they don't hurt you. So the following, let's say you failed that progress report and you're still failing in class, and you sit out another 3 weeks. So then that means you'll be out a total of 6 weeks. And by that time, you're still asked to come to practice, but by that time your sport is probably over and you've missed the whole season, because the seasons are shortened this year with COVID. So a recap of everything is, you have to pass all your classes, all of them, with a 70 or higher in order to be able to still participate in sports or whatever UIL event that you are in. So when your report card comes out and you fail one class or more, then you are ineligible and you have to sit out 3 weeks. And you have to wait until your progress report comes out. And if your progress report comes out and if you are passing a class, then you're good to go and you can play again. If you're failing a class, you have to sit out another 3 weeks and wait till your report card comes, and then you have to be passing all your classes then. And if you are, then maybe you can play, or your season may be done, or you'll have to wait again till another progress report comes out, and then by that time it's probably a new sport. So remember, it is only for ones who are failing for the no pass, no play for the progress report, which we'll explain to you again as the season goes along. But progress reports are only there to help you, not hurt you, if that makes sense.
It's basically common sense analogy here. Basically, the bottom line here is this. If you don't pass your classes, you don't play. That's basically it. Only one state has the law that we focused on back in 2018, and that's Texas. No other state has that law, but there needs to be. Write to your congressman, write to your governor. There needs to be a law. If there isn't, get to it. Come out next. They are the unseen. A little known fact of life in America. Children working hard for low pay, struggling to make their families survive. It's illegal backbreaking work. Dennis Murphy with Children of the Harvest. Stay with us. Earlier this season, I showed you, I didn't actually show you, you saw my reaction to that Dayline report about Children of the Harvest, which is this one right here. You didn't actually see it, but now you will see it. You will see pictures about children under the age of 12. By federal law, if you're 12 years old, you're old enough to work in the fields. In most states, actually. You will meet a kid who was 11 at the time, but she was under the age of 12. And you'll also meet the family of that 12-year-old who did the same thing. It may make you angry. It may make you boil. Here's Dennis Murphy.
It's an everyday bounty we take for granted. Plump tomatoes in December, citrus all the year round. Supermarket fruit and produce so appealing and shiny, you can't see the shadows of the tiny hands that may have picked them. Can't see the 11-year-old who gathered those blueberries that'll taste great on your cornflakes. Does it make your pickle more sour to know that it may have been picked by 5th grader James Flores, a little guy? You're not 5 feet, are you?
No, I'm 4 feet and 8 inches, I think.
4 feet 8 inches. And how much do you weigh?
71.
71 pounds. At the age of 11, James, an American citizen, is a veteran farmhand. He's been doing man-sized work since he was 7. And here's a 6-year-old following in his path. Too young? How about a 2-year-old beginning her apprenticeship? They are all children of the harvest. Maybe you thought child labor was a faded image of the way we used to be in America. An embarrassing practice captured in these old news documentaries and later legislated out of existence. Well, you'd be mistaken. Look closely in fields all across the country, and you'll find underage American children doing work that is forbidden by U.S. child labor laws. But as Dateline learned on a 4-month, 5,000-mile journey with James Flores and his family, migrant children have a way of turning all but invisible when the crops come in. It was a grueling trip with some scary moments and quiet beauty on the road. And along the way, we found a story of a devoted family and a father's struggle to provide for his children. It's a story that may make you angry. The story of a collision of needs. The pickers, the farmers, the food processors. It was 60 years ago, President Roosevelt signed into law sweeping new rules about when and where children can work. They were forbidden to toil in mines and mills. To this day, a child has to be at least 14 to work in most shops or stores, and even then, only for limited hours. But agriculture was always the exception. By federal law, if you were 12 years old, then you're old enough to work in the fields. And that's the irony. You may be too young at that age to stock produce in a grocery, but there's no one who will stop you from the backbreaking work of picking it. And if you're younger than 12, we found it can be a netherworld of don't ask, don't tell. Go back to last May. That's when we first met James Flores at his home in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. The baby, James's niece, is in the bucket because there's no running water in the family's cinder block house. The water they used to bathe and wash dishes with came from the irrigation ditch nearby. There's no electricity either. When the family of 12 wants to watch TV, they have to fire up a gasoline generator. Pablo Flores, the patriarch of the family, says he needs about $1,700 to pay overdue utility bills and restore water and electricity. But he's not going to make it in Texas. The picking is done for the season. If he wants to make money, he'll have to once again take the family up north to work the crops there. Pablo's 47 years old, a U.S. citizen and taxpayer who has picked fruit and vegetables most of his life.
When I finish a job like picking oranges, grapefruits, carrots, whatever, I have saved money to travel to the next job. I think the migrant worker is the happiest man in the world.
Pablo's boy, James, is learning computers in a summer program at his local school. He talks about being a carpenter someday. James's teachers regard him as bright, but he reads below grade level and could use this extra time in school. School principal Irma Infante, a child of migrants herself, knows all too well how many migrant kids never graduate from high school. She also knows James will be headed north in the morning.
Okay, are you going to go to school over there? Finish your summer school? Are you going to work? You're going to work? You are? These children never get to enjoy their childhood. It's always work. James is only a child, only a fifth grade child. I still believe he's too young to work out in the fields.
But it's a deaf ear's message to James's father, Pablo. To him, traveling the country, teaching his children to work, is education.
If they don't get an education, if they don't know how to do anything, what's going to happen to them? If I teach them how to pick apples, blueberries, cherry, watermelon, then they won't suffer.
At home that night, James's 12-year-old sister Rachel helps him pack. Pablo is twice widowed. His companion, Norma, is called Mom by the kids. She does most of the housework and childcare. The next morning, they're up before the sun. 10 of them, piling into Pablo's ancient van, careful to make room and back for the image of the Sacred Virgin of Guadalupe. Pablo has no credit cards, no AAA membership, no map, and just $700 to cover all gas, food, and emergencies until they find work. So on Saturday, June 13th, summer of '98, with millions of people hitting the beaches, with the Dow just below 9,000, the Flores family rolled north, destination unknown. Outside, it's a broiling 100 degrees, and inside, it's not much better. The 23-year-old van isn't air-conditioned. The kids fidget and wrestle. They may not know exactly where they're headed, maybe Michigan or maybe Indiana, but there's one thing they can count on. The van, with more than 200,000 miles on it, is sure to break down. Just a few miles from home, the radiator overheats. Later, the water pump gives out. They are forced to stop dozens of times. Their precious bankroll is getting nibbled for spare parts, like this new water pump. And there's no money for mechanics. Each time the van expires, Pablo and his sons will figure out some way to fix it themselves. And there are ingenious improvisations. A piece of the kid's water pistol helps patch one problem. And every mile they travel burns up a little more of the money that Pablo has scraped together. Even fast food restaurants are too expensive. At rest stops, James washes fruit for the family. As Pablo tries to reach old contacts up north, to find out who's got work and housing. Time is money, and road food eats it up. Bread, juice, and hot dogs, which they'll eat uncooked.
58.71.
They drive on into the night, across the line into Arkansas, where police stop Pablo for drifting back and forth across the white line.
It just appears to me that he's tired, that he's been traveling a long ways, and maybe he's just kind of unfamiliar with this area.
Right on all counts. At midnight the first day, they stop in exhaustion at a government-subsidized rest stop for migrants in Hope, Arkansas. James and the kids have been sleeping on top of one another. Pablo, after nearly 20 hours straight at the wheel, carries the children to the only bed they'll see in the entire trip north. The next day, torrential rain slowed them down. They'll sleep in the van, parked outside this $35 a night motel. It takes them 2.5 days to travel 1,600 miles to this farm workers camp in Bangor, Michigan. But a bruising disappointment. Now, the crew leader who encouraged Pablo to come here tells him that he's 2 weeks early for the blueberry pick. Very bad news for Pablo. His $700 bankroll, chipped away for gas, food, and spare parts, is now down to about $400.
$839.
And it will melt down even more over the next 9 days. A proud man turns to charities for help.
He was going to churches, and they gave him food and clothes.
Michigan's a loss. They pack up and roll through Indiana, looking without success for work and housing. So Pablo heads toward Ohio, where he knows of a migrant center that will take them in, but only for 72 hours. He tells us he's down to his last few dollars. He uses them to buy detergent, milk, and cigarettes. Making enough money to get the lights and water turned back on in Texas is now the least of his problems. He's got 9 other mouths to feed. This father, who said the migrant is the happiest man in the world, now says he's broke.
And broke is what this dad's all about. When we come back, will the luck of the flawless family ever turn? That is where we will continue with the children of the harvest. Stay with us. Well, as you've seen, James and his father Pablo are traveling up north harvesting the fruit of the land. No success so far, just a host of problems, mainly with the vehicle. But the luck is about to turn. Is it worth the price the family, and especially James, will have to pay? Once again, here's Dennis Murphy.
2 weeks, 2,000 miles from home, and their luck's been running about as rough as their van. Finally, they catch a break. In Fremont, Ohio, farmer Mike Yeagle needs people to pick his cucumber crop, and he has free housing too. On June 24th, the Flores unpack in what will be their home for 8 weeks of work. It's a converted barn, old mattresses, bare light bulbs, no running water inside, outhouse out back. James will share a bed with 2 of his brothers.
We will use this graph to
For the first week, James goes to a school program set up to keep migrant kids out of the fields. His sister and younger brothers attend too. But when the cucumbers are ready for picking, James's teacher finds an empty classroom seat.
He didn't come for like 4 days in a row, I believe. We really miss him here.
James is in the fields, working side by side with his father and older brothers, bent over a 6-hour day, 7 days a week. And he says the bending hurts his back, and the lifting can't help much either. When a bucket is full, it weighs about 25 pounds, a third as much as he does.
This bone hurts a lot.
Which bone? Show me.
The spine.
The spine bone hurts?
Yeah.
From what? From stooping or from
From
bending over like that?
From bending over.
Labor Department officials say it is against the law for a child this young to be working in the fields, unless it's on a small farm or his family's own farm. Perhaps that's why Pablo didn't tell Farmer Yeagle up front that his 11-year-old, James, was going to pick. The boy is working off the books. His cucumber tally is credited to his father and brothers. The more you pick, the more you're paid. Out here in the real world of the fields and blood obligations to family, the regulatory universe of child labor laws and government inspectors has all but disappeared.
James, could you ever go to your dad and say, you know what? I don't want to work today. I feel tired, I'm pooped, I'm not going to go out.
No.
Why not?
He'll take a lot of time. And he gets more tired.
So, if you don't go to work, your father's going to get more tired.
Yes, because he's going to get my work.
He's going to get your work if you don't go. Is that the way you see it?
And Dad, Pablo, needs every hand he can get to help him make ends meet. He sometimes relies on food stamps, but says he never collects welfare or unemployment insurance. He has no problem with his son working beside him.
If he wants to be next to me, you know, there's going to be nobody who can get him off the farm.
But it's the law.
I understand it's the law, but the law can do anything against a person's will.
In school, James's best subject is math. Out here, he's not only the best picker, he's also the family bookkeeper.
How much money do you make picking pickles?
Like $1,024
per week.
For a good week, we get like $1,024.
The farmer, Mike Yeagle, can see the 20-acre cucumber patch from his house, but he's got plenty of other chores to do. He works 1,300 acres, mostly corn and soy, with his brother. He tells us the farm earns them a comfortable but by no ways extravagant lifestyle. Yeagle drove his dad's tractor at 8, and personally thinks there's nothing wrong with children doing most farm work. But he's mindful of the law.
Youngsters under the age of 12 can't even be in the pickle field.
So if they're 10, they're too young to be there.
Right.
If they're 11, they're too young to be there.
Yeagle seems to have no idea that there is a child working adult hours in his own fields.
Mike, you got that very situation this year. You got the 11-year-old there, 7 days a week, 7 8-hour days.
In my field, it shouldn't be happening if it is. And despite what maybe Dad wants, I'll have to put a stop to it.
But the next morning, when Yeagle's brother hands out paychecks in the field,
Well, here's your check for last week's pickles.
James is picking right there in full view, but no one stops him. He'll continue picking for the remaining weeks of the season. And the cucumbers he picks roll down a country road, not to a farm stand, but to the plant of a food processing giant, the Heinz Company. From James's hand to our supermarket shelves. How many other children are out there picking illegally? No one knows for sure. But when the Associated Press took these photos in 1997, it reported finding 104 children working illegally in agriculture in a 5-month period, including this 4-year-old in the chili fields of New Mexico. Go! In South Haven, Michigan, kids are diving headfirst into the annual Blueberry Festival. But 11-year-old Yvette Villanueva doesn't have time for kid stuff. She's busy working against the seasonal clock. We followed Yvette and her family up from South Texas. Like James Flores, Yvette is an American citizen. She and her family are picking a blueberry crop in western Michigan, 200 miles from where James and his family are picking cucumbers. Yvette, who dreams of someday becoming a doctor, doesn't want to be here in the fields getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. But she and her 9-year-old brother Javier feel they owe their parents.
I feel proud of myself because I'm helping my parents and everything. And I feel like if I'm responsible to pay them back for everything they have done for us.
A late spring freeze followed by a summer drought has conspired to make for a bad berry year. Yvette, Javier, and the rest of the family picked from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a lunch break. But because the crop is bad, it takes a long time to fill the buckets. Their price per bucket on this day translates to about $2.30 an hour, way below minimum wage, $5.15 an hour. The farmer they're picking for, Richard Dukowski, knows that this season is a mutt. And he knows that some people will blame the growers for the plight of migrant workers.
It's very easy to say, well, these farmers, they're villains, they're terrible. Man, what a cop-out.
Dukowski's berry farm was planted by his father in the 40s. Migrant families like the Villanuevas provide the labor to keep his small acreage afloat. But he doesn't see any way they'll make a living wage this season, and it saddens him.
God, they're so grossly underpaid, I'll tell you something. It's sickening.
So you pay them more money than they get now. Problem solved.
I pay them. First, I got to get it before I can give it to them.
When the picking runs out, Yvette works in the shed packing blueberries. It has been a long day, and she seems to be nodding off.
This girl's 11 years old, Rich.
Let me ask you something. Did you see her crying? Are there any bruises on her body? I was 11 years old harvesting onions on a South Holland farm in Illinois. How I look to you today?
Hard work and clean air may build body and character, but farm work is also one of the most dangerous occupations there is. Just this year, an hour's drive from Rich Dukowski's farm, a 9-year-old died in the fields after his father accidentally ran over him with a truck. According to this General Accounting Office report, 59 child workers died on farms between 1992 and 1996, and 400 to 600 are injured each year. And then there's the controversial matter of pesticides. Is a safe level for a farm worker weighing 150 pounds still safe for a child who weighs half that? Or for a 25-pound 2-year-old? Some researchers believe that children in the fields are more vulnerable to pesticides than adults. Yet pesticide safety standards set by the Environmental Protection Agency don't take that into account.
Ice cream, you cream, we ask you for ice cream.
Of course, migrant children aren't working drudges all the time. They do find time to play and to dream bigger dreams. But a visitor to their world apart of fields and shabby trailer homes has to wonder if the eye blink of childhood isn't being taken from them.
Guys, if we could have a genie come out of a bottle, right, and give you a wish, would let you do anything you wanted this summer, what would you ask the genie to give you?
I would tell him to let me rest for a while and stop thinking for the summer.
Let you have a little rest. How about you, Javier?
Be rich, so we don't have to go peeking. Oh my God.
September 13th, Yvette and her brother make their first communion in Michigan. And then their migrant summer, a disappointing one, is finished. The family had hoped to bring at least $8,000 back to Texas with them, but after expenses, they've saved only about $3,500. They could try to recoup by staying north to pick apples, but Yvette's parents have decided to head home so the kids can get back in school in Texas. A little late, but still in time to make up their work. James isn't that lucky. By the time school starts in Texas, he's still in Ohio, helping his father and older brothers drop a new transmission into the heap. Once the work on the van is done, the Flores are all heading south to Florida to see what they can find there.
This is the last final check.
They're leaving behind Farmer Yeagle, who's thinking ahead to his corn and soy harvest, unaware that the Flores family's bad luck has already rubbed off on him. After expenses, Pablo and family have saved up $3,600 picking cucumbers. Figure in the cost of living expenses for 10, and it's apparent they'll need to do better than that to get the water and lights hooked up back in Texas. Back in their cinder block house, where unbeknownst to them, something has been going on. The family leaves the Yeagle place on a gray day. It looks like rain, but the van's wipers have stopped working. So they detour to a junkyard and buy a used windshield wiper motor. As they're installing it, the side door falls off. Pablo Flores, the Job of the migrant trail, lashes down the door with a wire hanger he keeps for emergencies. It's August 24th, and James and his family are looking for the freeways to the Sunshine State. Maybe early citrus is in. Maybe their luck will improve. Just maybe.
Yeah, just maybe. But is this any life for a child? When we return, more of the Flores family's journey to Florida picking those oranges. Then later, a surprise they could not have imagined once they get home. Dennis Murphy continues. Stay with us. Returning now to our story. So far you've seen James and his father Pablo and the rest of the family pick cucumbers. You've also seen another family pick blueberries for one farmer. But going back to the Floreses, they're now traveling to Florida in search of those oranges. But will they find luck now that the van is being torn apart? Once again, here's Dennis Murphy.
There are oranges to be picked in Florida, they hope, if only the Flores decrepit vehicle can get them there. In Ohio, it's the oil pump. Later, the engine overheats. While some of the children play or nap in the stifling heat, James, as always, finds ways to help his dad. In Tennessee, they're stopped by a state officer. He says he pulled them over because he saw something flapping out of the rear door of the van. But he seems as interested in the family's legal status. Of course, Pablo doesn't need a green card because he's a U.S. citizen, has been his whole life. Eventually, the officer is satisfied. They continue on their way. Pablo stops to sleep just a few hours at a time. It will take them 2.5 days to reach Florida. They have been gone from their home in Texas for 2.5 months. On August 26th at 1:30 in the morning, the road-weary Flores family of 10 descends on a 3-bedroom house in Orlando, Florida. It's the home of one of Pablo's older sons who works construction. While Pablo figures out what to do next, he enrolls James in the local 6th grade. School has been underway for 2.5 weeks.
But actually, I went over that.
People might look at you, Mr. Flores, and say that you are an obstacle to James's growth because you're always moving him about, keeping him in the fields when he might be in school.
No, I'm just trying to make him see what life is really about, so he can understand what the value of an education is.
Within weeks, the Flores kids have problems at their new school. James's 2 older brothers are suspended for threatening a teacher. They find construction work and consider dropping out of school altogether. Pablo, meanwhile, waits for work picking oranges. But the crop is late this year. He'll be unemployed for the next 6 weeks. He's run through about $1,000 of the $3,600 that he and the kids have saved from the last job. As Pablo sat waiting as summer became fall, we wondered if the Heinz Company back in Ohio was aware that it had bought cucumbers picked by an 11-year-old. It turned out they had learned that Dateline had recorded James working in the field of one of its contract growers. Ron Brooks is Vice President of Agriculture for Heinz North America.
When people see 11-year-old James Flores from Texas picking cucumbers that are on their way to a Heinz facility in Ohio, Heinz' reaction to that is what?
Well, that's wrong, and we just won't tolerate it. And we have taken corrective action with that grower. We won't be doing business with him.
Him, of course, was Mike Yeagle, the farmer who said he didn't know he had a kid working for him until we told him.
20 years of pickles with Heinz.
Yeah.
And they told you don't bring him anymore.
Yeah.
Are you the poster boy now?
I'm the poster boy. Even though I didn't know it, I'm still responsible for it. And I can't completely disagree with it.
Yeagle says he told Heinz what had happened. And he says he also talked to Pablo and told him James could not work the fields.
Did he say the boy wouldn't pick anymore?
Well, at the time, here again, I didn't police the field every day.
In fact, he did pick for the rest of that season.
I guess he was out there not all of the time, but off and on.
More on than off, according to what James and his father told us. But Yeagle feels he's been put in a difficult position.
The processor is saying, we don't want these kids working. The family head doesn't see any reason why they can't work.
And you're caught in the middle.
I'm caught in the middle. I'm a farmer, not a psychologist, and I'm not a police officer.
Heinz provided us with this binder full of documents outlining its efforts to improve migrant conditions and prevent child labor. And yet, the company cited only one previous instance, just one, in which it had terminated a grower for a child labor violation.
Do you think they're being a little hypocritical?
Yes, I do.
In what way?
Well, in singling me out, rather than working with me,
Is this farmer being punished, Ron, because he was candid and came forward and said, you know what? This was happening. I wasn't aware of it, but the TV people happened to be here. What are we going to do? Is it not just zero tolerance, but also putting the fires out of a public relations problem?
No, it's not at all. Our policy, and it's clearly stated, and growers know that we have a zero tolerance for this sort of thing.
You know what? If you and I got in a car on any July day, picked a field, we'd probably find some young ones out there.
Well, Dennis, I don't know that if we just drove around in every field we'd find them. I can't say that that's the truth.
But when we first started looking into this story in the summer of 1997, Dateline saw underage kids working in these same Ohio farmlands on several different farms, including this one that grew under contract to Heinz. In fact, that's where we found this 2-year-old learning the ways of the fields from her older aunts and uncles.
If Heinz were to apply the letter of their law as strictly as they did to you, to the other growers, how many pickles do you think they'd get at the end of the summer?
Heinz is going to find themselves out of the pickle business.
Of course, there are federal inspectors mandated with preventing child labor. But in the state of Ohio, there are just 35 of them, and their inspection beat includes industry as well as agriculture. Finding James Flores working would be like spotting a needle in a pickle patch. Mike Yeagle hasn't decided whether he'll try to grow pickles for some other company next year. But if he does, he says he'll avoid hiring families with underage kids.
My problem this year was Pablo Flores and one 11-year-old.
But it wasn't just one 11-year-old working on Yeagle's farm this summer. There was another child. This boy we saw working on that same pickle patch. He told Dateline producers he was the same age as James.
Another 11-year-old boy working in the fields. We talked about one, but there was another.
All right, well, again, I'm not saying that's not impossible. That's very possible that could have happened also.
And then, not to make this farmer's life miserable, but we had to ask about a serious problem with the Flores family's pay stub and timesheets. A problem that we had called to Mike Yeagle's attention much earlier in the season, but hadn't been fixed. By our reckoning, it appears that Yeagle paid the 5 members of the Flores family who were working on the books about $4.20 an hour for the season, nearly a full dollar less than minimum wage.
It looks like they're about $1,200 short for their season.
Well, I'm not saying that's not possible.
So it's possible they came all those miles from Texas with that awful van and worked for 7 days straight and they didn't even make minimum wage.
That's possible.
Yeagle says his other migrant families had no trouble meeting or exceeding the minimum wage because they were simply much better cucumber pickers than the Flores. Nonetheless, the law requires the farmer to make sure that his migrants make at least minimum wage, $5.15 an hour.
The law says every week goes by they got to be making minimum wage up to
That's
snuff.
correct. Yeah. If in fact your figures are correct, it just simply got away from us, and we weren't following it as closely as what we should.
Back in Florida, late October now, and there are finally oranges to pick. But the Flores family is back in the van, headed home to Texas. There has been an unexpected family crisis. Pablo's companion and the children's surrogate mother, Norma, had to leave to go home to Mexico to take care of her ailing mother. Pablo told us that he had to give her $2,000 of his dwindling savings. Florida has turned out to be a total bust. Wasted gas, wasted time. Without Norma, Pablo is concerned that there's no one to watch over the kids. So they're all back on the road, the last leg of a journey that no one expected to end in a rainbow and a pot of gold, but neither did they expect the ugly low blow to the spirit that's waiting for them back in Texas, back in their cinder block house.
Now, when we come back, the journey home, but the repercussions are just beginning. Then that's where we're the conclusion in the story. Stay with us. And also, one of the people who saw this report has commented saying how she's doing. She'll give us an update. Stay with us. And now the conclusion to our story. From Texas to from Texas to Michigan to Indiana to Ohio and Florida and now back to Texas. The Flores family has been on a hell of a trip from each state harvesting the fruit of the land. So far they've been in Ohio. and they've been in Florida with no luck at picking oranges. But now they're going back in Texas, waiting for them, a surprise they could not have imagined for them once they get there. Once again, Dennis Murphy.
They're closing the circle now, westbound on Interstate 10 across the Gulf Coast states, heading home to the Texas Valley. It's the third week of October. John Glenn is preparing to re-enter space. The Yanks have won the World Series. And James drowses in the back of the van. At a rest stop in Alabama, just when you think that van actually might limp them home, the Flores get a cruel and nasty surprise. The van is on fire. The ignition has sparked a blaze in the engine housing. And for a few moments, it looks as though the entire van is going to go up. The boys frantically bat at the flames. Rip the engine covering off and toss it on the pavement. The family is tired and irritable. All they want to do is get home, and now this. The fire becomes a symbol for the mostly futile summer and fall they looked for work. Why is James out here on I-10 on a Friday in October? This boy who won't be old enough to work in most stores for 2.5 more years. And yet he's been out in the fields, bent over picking, all but invisible since the age of 7. The Department of Labor in Washington is responsible for enforcing our nation's child labor laws. We showed some of our footage to Assistant Secretary of Labor, Susan King.
What really gets you when you see that is that in this day and age, at the end of this century, we're still seeing pictures that we would have expected to see at the beginning of this century.
What can we, the consumer, do? How can we be assured that we're going to get a pickle that isn't
They can't
picked
be
by a
assured.
10-year-old?
They cannot.
A tomato picked by an 11-year-old?
Unfortunately, they cannot be assured. They cannot know that exactly what they got has never been touched by a child's hand.
I'll pay you 50 cents more for the jar of pickles. Just, I don't want to be eating pickles picked by a kid. Can you guarantee me that?
I can't guarantee you that, but I can guarantee you that we're trying to do something about it.
She's talking about Operation Salad Bowl, an initiative launched this past year by Secretary of Labor Alexis Herman to put more inspectors in the fields and to crack down on child labor.
We're going in unannounced, on weekends, on holidays, early in the morning.
How many violations did you cite?
They say they did about 1,500 investigations. Less than 100 kids were found during that time. You just showed me video from one farm.
We looked to the right, we looked to the left, and we saw 2.
So clearly, if we look just on the statistics, either you or I are going to feel satisfied at what the results are.
I'm left at the end of this thinking that there really isn't anybody out there looking out for James Flores, unless there's the unlikely lightning bolt that one of your federal inspectors is actually going to show up one day.
He himself may not be protected because our investigators were not where he was. But I am hoping that 50 task forces, which went out targeting some of the places that we knew were abusive, would send a ripple effect throughout the industry. And perhaps that farmer who said, I can't look, I can't be the policeman, is going to say, I better double check.
But what about the child labor laws the government is enforcing? What's okay in the fields is taboo in the shop.
You can work in the fields at 12 and 13, but you can't work at your mall. You can't work at the fast food shop. Does the law make sense?
There are a lot of people asking, does it make sense?
Including some people on Capitol Hill. 2 bills now before Congress would forbid children under the age of 14 from working in the fields, with some exceptions for children from family farms. But none of the farmers we met thought much of that proposal. Not Rich Dukowski, the blueberry farmer in Michigan, who hired Yvette and her family, the Villanuevas.
Now, you can pass all the laws you want until you start putting those fathers in jail. You got to put them in jail if you want to institute change. If you want to do this, fine, but I think it's very un-American.
So you think there is a place for kids in the fields?
I think there's a place for kids in the family. That's what I think. How many kids are deserted by their parents because they're working 2 jobs? Before society starts condemning Senor Villanueva's choice of lifestyle, I suggest you look in your own backyard and find out why The kids were shooting one another in school. I'll tell you what, they lost the basics.
Remarkably, after a couple of hours of tinkering, they get the van running again. The Flores ordeal is almost over, or so they think. They're off the freeway on familiar local roads near Edinburgh, Texas. It's dusk by the time they pull up to their house. They have been gone for 4 months. They don't have the key to the locked gate. Pablo is forced to break into his own house. It's apparent right away that it isn't the first break-in since they've been gone. Even in the dark, they can tell that the place has been ransacked. Someone has gotten into their home in the months that they were away. Pablo strings an extension cord from a neighbor to get a light going in his house. Now he can see just how bad they've been hit. Rachel finds her mom's picture in the dirt. The generator that ran the TV set, gone. So's the old VCR. It's been stolen. What isn't flat out missing has been vandalized. Stuff is strewn all over the place. What a homecoming. But it is an amazing thing about this resilient family. It is hard to find the straw that will break their back. Pablo and the kids start cleaning the home that very night. Burning the trash out back. By daylight, the modest house doesn't look that bad. They clean all day. They are home.
This is your place. You shouldn't be moved from here.
After a journey of more than 5,000 miles, 4 months of that van and living in a trailer in a shabby barn, Pablo has almost nothing to show for his effort. A measly 8 weeks of work is all they found. He has finished his odyssey with a heartbreaking $400 in his pocket, $300 less than when he started. He's thinking about getting a loan from a friend to pay off the outstanding $1,200 utility bills. He's borrowing electricity from a neighbor, and they still have no running water. James is back in school, late. This bright, engaging, hard-working boy will have to catch up on what he's missed. In another 6 months or so, he and the family will be piling back into the van for the trip north. But with a big difference this time. James will be 12, old enough in most states to enter the farm workforce. This time, he'll be legal.
James will, however, still be required to go to school. He spends his weekdays there now and his weekends helping his father pick oranges. Another note, farmer Mike Yeagle says he checked his records and sent the Flores family a check for more than $1,000 to cover the difference between the minimum wage and what they were actually paid. Pablo Flores says he is using the money to buy clothing and things for the house and hopes to soon get his water and electricity turned back on.
Now, while this video was up with 3.5 views, 3.5 thousand views, one person has commented updating him how they're doing. It's one of the kids in the story. We'll give you that when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, we finished watching Children of the Harvest, a Dateline investigation back in 1998 that I uploaded and still had on my G drive from years ago. Now this video was up for 6 years. It had 3.5k views, which has a total of 3,580 views. This was published in May of 2017, which was 6 years ago. Now, look at all these comments here. There is one that stood out to me. This was from Lara in Chicago. I wonder where these kids are in 2020. This was 3 years ago. This was from Villa 17441. This was from 3 years ago. She says, I am Yvette from the story. We are here and thankfully well. My brothers, sisters, and parents now living a very different life than before. I replied saying, I'm glad to hear from you. That's from the update. Now, stranger, see a few comments on here. Now, one of the persons says, someone you know. Countries have laws for a reason, yet we're supposed to feel guilty for eating blueberries because some families constantly choose to enter and reside in a county undocumented, illegal, to put their children to work, illegal, accept wages under the minimum requirement, illegal. Then process to not pay any taxes on said wages, illegal. We all have hardships but still have to follow the laws. So sorry, but no. One person says, the Flores family in the video were not illegal. I believe you missed the information. They mentioned too that they pay taxes. Do not be quick to judge. Not all Americans are illegal. I was not either. The children follow the harvest and go where their parents take them. These children do not have a choice. Instead of taking time to criticize, ask yourself, how can you make a difference? If anyone did that, things would change. It's 2023, and it's still happening that young children are picking the fruits and vegetables on our tables. Nothing has changed. Okay. Like someone else mentioned, this video, and it's obvious, is to bring awareness of how it was still happening in the late 1990s. How about this? It's still happening in 2023. And this is from Blitzful. It's not so you can feel sorry for us or guilt trip for you eating those blueberries. Believe me, we were very aware of what we were doing. Not all illegal. I was not, my parents were not. It's to bring awareness and what's going on today in our country. I worked for $2.50 an hour picking buckets and buckets of blueberries. Why are those same blueberries $2.50 more a pint? No one is wrong. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. But as soon as something change, those were all the comments. So I'm really glad y'all responded to this video. Now, if the person who commented is watching this, I would like for you to come on the show one day and tell us how you're doing, along with the Flores family. So if y'all are watching, y'all are welcome to stop by the show and tell us how you're doing. We would love to hear from you. But this ain't over yet, because in 2010 or 11, Dayline did another Children of the Harvest. This is from America Now. And by the way, I also talked about this 5 months ago. It's just child labor laws have been violated. So, there's your sign right there. Well, that's it for Throwback Thursday, going Friday. Coming up on Friday, the Racist Hidden Camera video that I promised you. But first, our viral break. You may remember yesterday that we showed you office tantrums, meaning employees, meaning those office freakouts. It's a lot of rage happening. Oops, that was the wrong one. But here's one we have not showed you. Take a look. 60 seconds.
If you are serious about it, talk to your doctor.
Now, like people say, many of these online videos are fake, but some are just verifiable. I mean, YouTube makes it look like you're in the office. So that's what YouTube says. Now, in the words of former NBC Nightly News with anchor Brian Williams, that is our broadcast for this Throwback Thursday going to Friday. I hope to see you right back here on Give Me a Break Friday. Have a great day. Have a great night. Have a good night, everyone.